Welcome back. We are back actually with another segment of Atticus Nair Does Crafts.
That segment sucks.
Says who?
Everybody.
Fine. Today, we're going to start a new segment called Q&A with Atticus.
You don't even have any questions to answer, you idiot.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Fine then, we'll just start the frickin' video. Really fast, before we get started today, I do want to mention that we're actually going to close registration for our online tournament in the Mistech Forest tonight. When this video goes live, it will go live sometime on Monday, alright? And on Monday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that will close for the Mistech Forest. So if you're interested in doing an online tournament completely thought up by myself and a couple of mods in the Discord server that I run, definitely go down into the Discord. You can @ me, you can @ Discord_mods. Anyone that's in that team will be happy to help get you registered. The registration will close tonight. At midnight, I will run the commands that build the lobbies, and everybody will start adding people and boosting friendships to make sure this online tournament actually works. So if you're at all interested, go down there really fast and join. It's pretty much going to be a pretty automated setup as soon as I hit the commands. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting tournament. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. What is going on, guys? So today we are actually back, and today we're actually gonna be looking into another Pokemon who's got quite an interesting story. So this Pokemon isn't even out in like the main series games yet. We know for a fact that he's gonna be in Sword and Shield, but he was kind of released in Pokemon Go, which is kind of interesting. But either way, kind of a cool backstory that Melmetal actually has, and kind of an interesting Pokemon in Pokemon Go, because we do have a couple of unique pieces that kind of set him up to be an interesting Pokemon. So let's figure out why. Today we're actually going to be looking at Melmetal, who is a pure steel type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board at a whopping 35.99. That's insanely high. So that is just like screams Master League to me. But to get into the Great League here, you can do a 1 on attack, 15 defense, 14 stamina at 15.5. which will actually hit that $14.99, keeping you underneath the 1500 requirement while still giving you a great stat product to work with there. Now, according to my spreadsheets and all numbers that I have ran in the Freestyle Great League, just anything goes, out of 548 uniquely typed participants, 130th in bulk and 107th in stat product is where Melmetal stacks up. And honestly, that's not too bad. That's what? Close to the top 20%-ish in both of those. Stat product definitely looking a little bit better than bulk, but still, that's actually pretty gnarly there. And of course, all of that does come from our base stats here with a 226 attack, 190 defense, and a 264 in stamina. So that 264 in stamina definitely does help us out quite a bit in terms of our bulk. If these two were just kind of swapped, oh my god, this guy would be a monster. Either way, that is actually what we're rocking with, and that actually looks pretty good. But like I usually say, the moves is what makes up the other half to being a great Pokemon here. So here's where I think Melmetal gets a little interesting, because we only have one fast move. No fast TMs needed on this Pokemon here. So Thunder Shock here, which is actually the decent one. It's actually the pretty good one. 4.5 energy per turn for 1.5 damage per turn. Of course, we're not really focusing on damage there because that's pretty abysmal, but that 4.5 energy per turn is quite crazy. So that's definitely a good start. And considering that's our only move there, you can kind of tell we're going to go with Thunder Shock today. But then we get into these charge moves here, and here's some interesting tidbits. So our only stab move is Flash Cannon, but we also have Rock Slide, which is a very, very interesting move. Thunderbolt, which is actually a little bit more interesting than our last move, which is definitely Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is just kind of like meh. It's great in terms of damage output, but holy cow does it cost a lot. So while I was actually comparing movesets for Melmetal here, it kind of... So we're available in 3 cups. And out of those 3 cups, we actually have an interesting situation where in one of the cups I found that one moveset still does its job and actually ends up giving you a little bit better in terms of win percentage. But in 2 of the cups, we really kind of do need to fall back on a specific moveset. So the main moveset that we're going to look at today, the one that's used in more cups than not, is actually going to be Thundershock, Thunderbolt, and Rock Slide. In the first cup that we're actually going to look at today, Thundershock, Flash Cannon, and Rock Slide actually seem to really do a lot better in terms of win percentage, while it still kind of kept the role that Melmetal actually plays in the cup really nicely. So it was kind of a win-win in that scenario in terms of my mentality. So let's actually talk about which cups were available in. Melmetal actually was available in the Boulder Cup, Kingdom Cup, and in Season 1. So back in the Boulder Cup, Melmetal, I actually really despise Melmetal in terms of the Boulder Cup. Without putting too much of my personal opinion into the numbers, because the numbers don't lie, I just always felt like Melmetal was a one-trick pony. He was only there to beat Skarmory, and I hate one-trick ponies. I hate Pokemon that literally can only do one thing, because you're going to end up getting stuck in some situations where when you get switch locked or something like that, and you're just kind of stuck and you literally forfeit a Pokemon that has no chance up against anything else. And that's always what I felt Melmetal's kind of downfall was in the Boulder Cup. So I never really cared for it, but it definitely does have the role of the Skarmory killer, which it still does really well at. So I have to give it credit where credit's due. It does have its role, and it does the role very well. It's just that I hate that that's the only thing I feel like it does. In the Kingdom Cup, we didn't really see a whole lot of Melmetal in the Kingdom Cup. At least I personally don't remember seeing a whole lot of Melmetal. I don't remember talking about it too much either. I mean, the Kingdom Cup was all about the Kings anyways, and Melmetal kind of didn't really live up to some of the numbers that the Kings put up. So I definitely, after doing the deep dive, the Kingdom Cup is actually a pretty interesting cup for Melmetal here. I mean, of course, the Kings are going to have a pretty good time with him, but still, I mean, Melmetal actually does put up some really good numbers there. And then in Season 1, I feel like I feel like Rock Slide is almost like Melmetal's like, holy cow, he has Rock Slide, and holy cow, he gets to it really fast with Thundershock. Like, I feel like Rock Slide is almost Melmetal's like huge perk. And after Bastiodon came out, Bastiodon was just kind of like, hey, I've got, Smackdown and Stone Edge, and I've got all these rock moves and Flamethrower, and I can, do good with it. So Melmetal kind of got like pushed to the side just a little bit. So I don't know. I think that in Season 1, a lot of people went for the Bastiodon rather than Melmetal, and I don't blame them for that, because I do feel like if you're running Melmetal to take out the flyers because you have Thundershock here and Rock Slide here, then Bastiodon does the exact same job, and in some scenarios probably would be better. Not faster necessarily, because, this is freaking fast. Only, 5 seconds until we can fire our first Rock Slide. So, I mean, it just kind of, I don't know. I think Bastiodon is probably just a tad bit better in more situations than Melmetal is, but Melmetal still definitely has its place. So with all that, mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's actually go ahead and get into the Boulder Cup, and let's actually talk a little bit about some shield scenarios here. So one of the interesting things about the Boulder Cup is that this cup, I really did find that Thundershock, Rock Slide, and Flash Cannon actually perform just a tad bit better than with Thunderbolt. Even though Thunderbolt is kind of the generally preferred moveset, I really do think that Flash Cannon helps you out in a couple of matchups where it could make a difference, and it actually still lets you win in the Skarmory matchup, whereas if you had Thunderbolt, yeah, you're hands down gonna do way better up against Skarmory. And if that's all you need Melmetal for, then definitely go with Thunderbolt here. But in terms of like having more wins under your belt, Flash Cannon actually works out quite a bit better here in the Boulder Cup. And we'll see kind of an example of that later on in the 1 versus 1 shield scenario. So we're gonna start with our 0 versus 0, which is a 12.5%. We only have 2 wins here. Unfortunately, we have a win up against Gallade and Skarmory, which, like I said, Skarmory is kind of our main target. It's kind of our bread and butter as to what we're gonna be doing in the actual Boulder Cup, so no surprise there. Gallade is also kind of interesting to see here, but if Gallade is using a Psychic type move, then it does kind of make some sense that our Steel typing is just going to be able to pretty much handle that with ease. Next, we move into our 1 versus 0, which is a 50% here. A whopping 50%. I mean, I kind of consider 50% like bare minimum in a 1 versus 0. So we actually have losses up against Lucario, Whiscash, Bastiodon, Medicham, Steelix, Swampert, and Marshtomp. So a lot of those make quite a bit of sense, like Lucario, Medicham, definitely going to be able to output a ton of fighting type damage, which of course steel types have a problem with. Whiscash, Swampert, Steelix, Marshtomp, all of those have some access to at least ground type moves, so hurts pretty bad there. And Bastiodon actually having access to Flamethrower kind of sets us up for a really bad list of losses there. Next we move into our 0 versus 1, which is a 6.3%. Only actually winning up against Skarmory. So, like I said, Skarmory is kind of our main target here, in the fact that we still beat Skarmory even though Skarmory has 1 shield up on us. Definitely goes to show that we can still handle our own up against it. Last but not least, we do move into our 1 versus 1 shield scenario, which is a whopping 25%. So at least it's better than our 0 versus 0. We actually end up winning up against Skarmory, Gallade. We actually can win up against ourselves as Melmetal and Torterra, which I thought was interesting. So averaging out all 4 of those shield situations, we do end up with a 23.45. And if you've been keeping up with our shielding scenarios lately, you can kind of go ahead and guess what my opinion on is for that. Next, moving on into the Kingdom Cup. So in the Kingdom Cup, it was kind of a toss-up. Whether you wanted to run Thunderbolt or Flash Cannon is going to be completely up to you. The numbers generally stay the same. The matchups, though, are just a slight bit different. Like a couple of the Pokemon that have like a neutrality to the electric typing are going to have pretty much a decent matchup up against us, but the Pokemon that have a kind of a resistance to Flash Cannon, generally, you know, we're gonna kind of have a problem with. And what I'm talking about there is like things like Empoleon and things like Kingdra. So generally those two actually end up resisting quite a bit of the steel damage, where they actually end up taking neutral damage to Thunderbolt. So if we ran Thunderbolt, we could actually do pretty decent up against them, considering we're not pushing resisted damage at that point. But if we run Flash Cannon, we do better up against a couple of other things in the Cup. So for what it's worth, in the Kingdom Cup, I definitely think that it's okay to run either moveset. Either Flash Cannon or Thunderbolt will work out just fine. Whichever one that you have probably is going to be okay. As long as it's not Hyper Beam, you'll be a-okay there. But for the purposes of this video, I had already written down like everything for Flash Cannon. So we're just going to talk about the Flash Cannon numbers. Keep in mind the numbers are extremely similar, just a couple of the matchups are a little different here. So starting in our 0 versus 0, we do end up with a 52.9% here, losing up against ourselves, Dragonair, Flygon, Bastiodon, Blaziken, Torkoal, Steelix, and Lucario. And a lot of those make quite a bit of sense. Melmetal, unfortunately this time we are able to lose up against ourselves, which is kind of interesting considering that we won up against ourselves in a totally different cup. But Dragonair gonna have a ton of damage to output, especially with Aqua Tail. It's gonna be able to bust through so many shields, and it's just gonna be able to output tons of damage. Flygon's gonna have some interesting moves with its ground type moves. Bastiodon's gonna have Flamethrower. Blaziken's gonna have either Blaze Kick or it's gonna have Blast Burn. Torkoal's gonna have access to Earthquake if I'm not mistaken, and it has access to a fire type move. I don't remember exactly which one. Steelix gonna have access to ground type moves, and Lucario gonna be able to just tear through us with the fighting type move. Next, moving on into the 1 versus 0 situation, we actually jump up to a whopping 70.6 here, which is always good to see. Losing up against Lucario, Blaziken, Flygon, Bastiodon, and Steelix, and that's kind of where you can see what our biggest threats are. Lucario, Blaziken, definitely going to be able to output tons of fighting damage just to start with, and then they can both kind of just end up going either way with Power Up Punch for Lucario or with Fire type damage from Blast Burn or Blaze Kick from Blaziken there. Flygon, Bastiodon, and Steelix all going to have something super effective up against us as well, just like we already talked about. Next, moving on into our 0 versus 1, we actually end up with a 5.9%, so even worse than our Boulder Cup number there, but only one matchup that we still end up winning here, which I actually think is a pretty decent matchup to win, is the Altaria matchup. So with Rock Slide, we're able to actually target Altaria pretty well here and do actual good damage up against it and still end up taking it out even if it has one extra shield up on us. Last but not least, we do move into the 1 versus 1, which is a 58.8%, so good to see that we at least do better than our 0 versus 0, losing up against Bronzong, Bastiodon, Melmetal, Steelix, Flygon, Blaziken, and Lucario there. So Bronzong was an interesting one to see, because it's generally going to be having Confusion as its fast move, and then it's going to have, what, either Heavy Slam or Flash Cannon? And that's pretty much it. So it's able to just pound away. Steel versus steel, it still ends up beating us there. So pretty interesting. So averaging out all 4 of those shield scenarios, we do end up with a 47.05. And keep that in mind because we're going to come back and talk to that in just a second. Last cup that we are featured in here is the Season 1 Regionals. Of course, we're going to go with Thundershock and Rock Slide here, but this cup I actually decided to switch it up and go with the Thunderbolt just because it was way better in this cup, like way better. So starting off in our 0 versus 0 here, we actually end up with a 52.2%, so looking pretty nice already. Losing up against Magneton, Fortress, Lantern, Bastiodon, Skuntank, Umbreon, Medicham, Whiscash, Quagsire, and Steelix though, but a lot of those do make quite a bit of sense. Magneton actually gonna just be able to output a lot of electric or steel. It's kind of a weird one. Fortress gonna have Earthquake, Lantern, it is going to actually resist a little bit of our damage there, so I guess that's okay. Plus, it actually is pretty bulky. Bastiodon, we've talked about plenty of times in this video. Skuntank and Umbreon were definitely interesting to see here, but Skuntank does have, what, Flamethrower, and Umbreon is extremely tanky. Medicham, Whiscash, Quagsire, and Steelix all going to have access to ground-type moves there, so pretty interesting. Then we move into our 1 versus 0 here with a 73.9%, so the highest that we've seen all day, only losing up against Umbreon, Bastiodon, Quagsire, Whiscash, Medicham, and Steelix. So those are definitely going to be the ones that we want to look out for in the cup here. Umbreon, like I said, that's kind of a weird one, but the bulk does make a lot of sense there. Bastiodon gonna have Flamethrower, Quagsire gonna have a ton of ground type damage, Whiscash falls into that as well, Steelix has Earthquake, and Medicham is Medicham. Next, to move into our 0 versus 1, which is a 17.4% here, winning up against Skarmory, Frostlass, Tropius, and Altaria. So those are definitely going to be your targets in the actual Season 1 Cup here. Skarmory, we've talked a little bit about him already, definitely going to be a good target for us, especially when we have Thunderbolt. It's going to make it so much better. Frostlass, it is going to have some weakness to the steel type. Unfortunately, if we get rid of Flash Cannon, we're gonna have Thunderbolt, but it should actually have a pretty big problem with Rock Slide as well. Tropius actually gonna fall into that as well, and Altaria gonna fall into the Rock Slide trap there as well. So those are actually some really nice targets to have. Those are, I mean, Skarmory, Tropius, and Altaria are considered, gods among the Great League as they are, and Frostlass is kind of one of those wild card Pokemon that a lot of people like to use, so that's actually a pretty nice little list there. Last but not least, we do hit our 1 versus 1 shield scenario, which is a 47.8%, losing up against Bronzong, Lantern, Umbreon, Skuntank, Sableye, Bastiodon, Quagsire, Medicham, Whiscash, and Steelix. So most of those we've already mentioned, and most of those are pretty self-explanatory. So it's kind of a really interesting Season 1 Regionals performance there. After you average everything together, it ends up at a 47.825 for Season 1. So looking back at all 3 cups, Boulder Cup averaging out at a 23.45. I don't feel comfortable recommending Melmetal in the Boulder Cup. I mean, like I said, if you absolutely need a counter for Skarmory, Melmetal will do you great. It will do just fine. Run Thunderbolt on it for that exact reason. But outside of that reason, I just don't see it, because there's so much stuff in the Boulder Cup that can actually counter just the pure steel typing that it makes it so much harder to run Melmetal in the Boulder Cup. I just don't like it. I'm sorry, I don't. In the Kingdom Cup though, I mean, averaging out at 47.05, I definitely say that's a yes. I definitely recommend it just because it has quite a few interesting matches, especially with things like Altaria, which was a huge threat. It doesn't necessarily do great up against the Kings. Like, we didn't actually mention Lapras at all, but it does okay up against Lapras. It doesn't show up in our losses anywhere. And if you threw Thunderbolt on it, it would do even better up against Lapras. So up against the Kings, it's kind of like meh, but I definitely think that the win on Altaria and on Lapras is a definite step in the right direction there. And I don't think that you'd necessarily be too disappointed if you ran Melmetal on the Kingdom Cup. And then lastly, in Season 1, I mean, that's our highest one all day at a 47.825. I'd say that's a yeah as well. Considering that Skarmory and Altaria are just beasts amongst themselves in the Season 1, that's definitely a great reason to run it there. Tropius is also pretty big deal. I didn't see too many personally at my regionals, but I mean, a lot of people really dig the Tropius, especially with Razor Leaf, so definitely a good idea to bring something for that. And I just think that overall in Season 1, it does really well. I personally, I don't remember running into too many at my personal regionals, but I mean, the numbers back it up. It's actually pretty freaking good there. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. I will let you know that Blaziken was scheduled for today as of like Friday, and then over the weekend, Melmetal took over. And then as soon as I started, I think I had gotten through like the Boulder Cup, and like, I checked back and Blaziken had taken the lead again. So if you guys are at all interested in kind of like controlling what we talk about in the videos in terms of which Pokemon we're looking at, definitely go down into the description, join the Discord server, and make sure that you go into the Deep Dive Votes channel. There's, you know, tons and tons of Pokemon that you can vote for. You can vote as many times as you want to, as long as it's only for one Pokemon per vote. So you can't like vote Melmetal like 10 times just to rocket it up to the top. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, that'll be it. So I'll go ahead and show those ending credits for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that. But if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below about the video. I do highly appreciate you guys watching. If you guys want to support me in any way, there are several links down in the description for Patreon, joining the community here on YouTube, or even just directly PayPal if that's your thing. I greatly appreciate everyone's name that's on screen, as you guys have showed some sort of support outside of just viewing the videos, and I thank you guys. You don't understand from the bottom of my heart. So until our next video, guys, I will catch you then.